And a disclaimer, this is a mid-in-game guide. That means that this build is still working in progress to become the completed in-game build. I'm still working on it. There's still long ways to go. I think I'm still missing like 4x or 5x my DPS happening when it comes to this build. But it's still working on progress, and then since it's a new transform build, I still have to spend like a few hours in path building and see what else I can do and expand upon it. But other than that, let's go ahead and get started. Welcome to 1.1 mid-in-game guide for the anti-meta summoner class. We're going to talk about every single minion alone, what's going on with this build, and then after we talk about every single minion alone, then we're going to talk about all the minions together as a combo effect and how each one benefits each other, including how it helps the D2 Mercenary. So first things first, we're going to talk about the Eternal Regret Angels. I call them angels because they look pretty badass, and to me they're like regret angels in my book, but they are called Eternal Regret. One of the most coolest badass things about them is that when you're chilling in your hideout, you can actually make yourself look like a worldly different dimensional angel, which is pretty damn cool. As you can see, it's pretty cool to set it up like that, and it just makes you super badass while you're in the hideout. Alright, so we're going to go to the Blood Oxidox because it's the best way to showcase what this minion does. So we're in Blood Oxidox to explain what the Eternal Regret Angels can do. There's going to be a lot of pausing in between, so I can actually talk about every single ability that it's cast, and then you'll see the stats on the screen and what it does. So the link setup that I have for it is Raise, Summon Spectres, Feeding Frenzy, Minion Speed, and Spell Echo. You'll notice that they're pretty invisible. I believe it's a bug right now where sometimes they don't really show as Spectres in your hideout. What I've noticed is that when I have the Corpse Walkers, they'll actually come back and be visible again. So, W Corpse Walkers, if you want to defeat the bug of your regret angels being invisible, just walk around and they will reappear again. So, super awesome. What you see here is called Zana's Humanoid Elite Soul Beam. It does about 4,000 damage at monster level 40, has a 20% to freeze enemies, 70% of physical damage is converted to cold damage, which is super good. So it adds more CC viability. It mostly does cold damage, which it's pretty cool for minions to have CC like that. So that is what you see right now. That's really good on single targets like rare monsters and elite monsters because I noticed that they'll get chilled and almost frozen sometimes. It does a lot of damage for 4K alone for monster level 70. The next skill you see here is called Xana's Humanoid Elite Projectile. It's not AoE. It looks like it's AoE, but it's just a normal projectile. It does about 2K DPS, which pierces all targets, so you can actually slap a return projectile on it and like greater volley to it. It's better to use greater volley because when it spreads out and it does the return, especially if it's a rare monster or unique monster, will hit the monster and does more DPS. I don't know why everyone does their greater projectiles because it spreads out too wide, and then when it does return, not all the projectiles are going to hit the single rare monster or the unique monster boss that you're fighting. So it's better to put greater volley onto those projectiles. Super good. It chills the lower white mobs, the trash mobs, and stuff like that. Helps a lot. This next spell you see is called Xana's Humanoid Elite Stormcall. It does 2,500 at monster level 70. It converts 60% physical damage converted to cold. But the main kicker here is that it always inflicts brittle. And that is super important when it comes to DPS and effects and abilities. It's actually a really game changer where you can actually kind of focus on a brittle build if you wanted to with these eternal regret angels. what brittle is that it adds a 15% chance to the critically affected enemy that's affected by brittle. So if the enemy is affected by brittle, or even the player, so we'll actually use the player for example. If the player is affected with a debuff of brittle, monsters have a chance to hit the player for 15% chance. So that is a super major DPS spike for your minions, for your Diablo 2 merc, because there's a really big combo that your D2 mercenary needs to crit a lot. That brittle effect, when it uses that storm call, is very powerful, is very effective. Now it's time to talk about the biggest player when it comes to the anti-meta build. The biggest player in this game is the Dancing Duos. We're not going to call it the Dancing Dervish. We're going to call it the original name, the Dancing Duos. I want the name to be returned, but this is the main engine when it comes to this build. Pretty self-explanatory. If you're not familiar with this, what it does is that when you reach a certain amount of kills, you get Rampage, and then you summon 2 flying swords that go mayhem and crazy. And I consider this actually the best minion skill in the game. It's the only minion skill that has the fastest, that has the best zoom screen clear. Like, it can go off the screen and kill minions. It can do all these crazy shenanigans. Especially if you really try to focus on doing maximum DPS with the Dancing Duos. The cool thing about powering up the Dancing Dervish 2, which is actually good for League Start, is that you do not have to 6-link it. All you have to do is make sure you get 6 sockets on it. Once you get 6 sockets on it, you're good to go, and you can put, it's actually considered a 7-link, because the Dancing Dervish itself is a skill gem, right? And then it gets 6 more support gems that hook up Dancing Dervish. And the support gems are added chaos damage, minion speed, chance to poison, minion damage, withering touch, vitality. Vitality is only there is that I crafted this whole sword all by myself from scratch. I bought myself a perfect Dancing Duo. What happened is that I did a 6 slot, and when I paid for it, it turned out to a red one, which is fine. I was supposed to get a green one so it can actually put faster attack speed on here. So that is it for the support gems for the Dancing Duos. Now we're going to talk about crafting the colors, and you guys are probably going to learn something if you're a new player. When you're buying the Dancing Duos off of the market, you're going to get so many different colors. It's always going to be the wrong combination. It's always stressful, and if you want the right combination, it's going to be very expensive, which is going to cost you divines, and you're not going to be very happy about that. So the best way to do it is actually craft your own colors. I'm not going to click any of this because I will, destroy what I've already crafted. So we have the sword replacement for the Shadow Mimic of crafting, so I can show you exactly what happens when we're crafting the Dancing Duo to get the colors that we want. So our goal is to get 3 color blues, and how are we going to do that? Well, it doesn't matter what sockets are on the sword, if it's 4, 5, or even 6 sockets on the weapon. All you have to do is you come to the crafting bench, and what you do is you select 3 sockets, and it will actually reduce the sockets to go back to a 3 socket, removing the 4th one. And there's ways that you can farm for the colors. So one way to do it is you can start from this 2 sockets, make these 2 blue if you want to. So we're going to go ahead and select 2 blue sockets, costing us 2 chromatic orbs, which is super fine. That's super cheap. And then what you do is you click on the 3 socket to get a 3rd one. And then what you could do is actually you go back to 2 sockets and just rinse and repeat until you get the blue one. Which this might actually take me a minute because blue is the hardest one. But for me, that's not really my style. I don't like gambling back and forth like that. What I like to do instead is just buy it straight immediately, getting 120 chromatic orbs, and then making it blue. And then once you have your blue sockets, then you just keep moving on, and then you just move on and going further. And just like we discussed before with the 2 and 3 sockets, you will have to keep gambling like that from now on, since you did uh, pay for the 3 blue sockets now available. And then you just um, pretty much have to gamble your way up, which is actually going to be very easy because we're looking for green or red sockets for the weapon. We just do the same step for 5 sockets and 6 sockets, and then you will eventually have a 6 socket weapon. So I hope that's very helpful. A lot of people don't know this crafting method. A lot of people are just trying to gamble with a chromatic orb. So don't gamble. That's one of the number one rules I don't do this game. I do not do a no gamble. I don't do any gambling. I don't mess with gambling. It's a bad concept for real life and even within the game. So no loot boxes, no gambling. We don't do no gambles here. We don't do it. Gambling is bad. So last time I checked on the path of building, one sword alone does 100k DPS, so we have 2 of them, so that's 200k DPS going on. Um, and that's where it's at right now with the mid end game damage. So now we're going to talk about the void spawns. Just like the regret angels that we talked about earlier, I'm going to be doing the same thing when it comes to the void spawn. I'm going to pause it and explain the damage and the DPS that it does, and all the mechanics that it does. So let's go ahead and get started. And here's a cool thing. It's the same thing that's going on with the Dancing Dervish when it comes to support gems. Because the Void Spawn itself is within the gear, he's not taking a slot up, which is really nice. So when you have a 6 link, that's what I'm working on next, is getting this to a 6 linker. Once I have this chest piece 6 linked, it's going to have 6 support. It'll have 6 support gems supporting the Void Spawns instead of 5, which is really awesome. 6 support gems are return projectiles, minion speed, chance to poison, greater volley, and faster casting speed. They only have one ability that's called Eldritch Tentacle Minion Projectiles Deep Recall. It is a spell projectile ability, so spell echo, faster casting speed, all that stuff works on this minion. I believe since the skill gem is level 20 for the void spawns, their monster level is 70, so that means that the projectiles do between 600 to 1,800 lightning damage. But the main kicker for the ability is actually has a 60% chance to shock enemies. So literally, it's always applying shock at all given times. And the shock value is actually super important for the Diablo 2 Mercenary that what we're going to cover next after we get done with the Raging Spirits. And that's why I went over the minions first, so you understand every single detail that's happening, because there's so many interactions going on. It's like a super wombo combo build, and everything's like a team player, so everyone's helping each other out, doing damage and stuff, and then you have more understanding. So remember, the Regret Angels, they do the cold damage and applying Brittle, which adds critical strike, which is going to be super important for the Diablo 2 Mercenary when I start talking about it. And because the Diablo 2 Mercenary needs the crit value for the shock from the Void Spawns is another thing, because the D2 Mercenary actually has impulsors, so if it kills a shock enemy, the enemy will explode. So there's a lot of combinations that these minions help with other minions within the build. Next, we're going to talk about Raging Spirits and Carrion Golem. This is something I'm just experimenting with. With Carrion Golem, basically, it just gives physical damage to all your minions close by, and the Golem itself will do more damage with more non-Golems near it, so it helps out with his DPS. But the only reason why I really have Carrying Golem is just because I can have a lazy build and not press no buttons, really. So with the Carrying Golem, I can just run around and not have to recast it because it's pretty tanky. And I don't have to, cast any spells abilities. So that's a really good thing about this build. is that you really don't have to do much. It's literally an AFK build, and you can just sit back and relax and just run around, and all the minions will do the work, and you literally have to press no buttons. But there's only one downside to this. It doesn't help with the animations to command the minions to go a certain direction, which I'm going to show with the Raging Spirits. That's why I have these two gems here to swap it out, because sometimes I'll be in a situation where I need to tell my minions, like, hey, look, y'all need to go over here and attack this target off screen, especially when I'm fighting the D2 mercenaries in the map campaigns, and that's when I use Raging Spirit. But Raging Spirit overall, is very strong. So as you see, I'm literally using the Summon Raging Spirits for the AI to command the minions to go where I want it to go. And of course, the Summon Raging Spirits are super good alone. They have good aggressive aggro, just like the dancing duos, and they do good. They do good DPS overall, and they also summon the Phantasm Ghosts as well. The support gems I have for the Summon Raging Spirits or the Carrion Golem is Minion Speed, Summon Phantasm Ghosts, and Chance to Poison, which gives them chance to poison and do a lot of DPS because they do physical and chaos damage. So this build is basically chaos, physical damage, poison build, and they apply lots of dots, especially from the dancing duos. Alright, now it's time to talk about the D2 Mercenary. So the best mercenary, in my opinion, is Alsina, the Deadshot Ranger Sniper. So what she does is that she uses Split Arrow and Rain Arrow of Saturation, and also she gives us Haste and 2 auras that are Grace and Haste. I'm still going to try to keep searching for a replacement of her, finding her out in the wild. I'm hoping that I can try to get Haste and Hatred so I can actually use a different aura like Wrath for my minions to have more lightning damage, or Pride or something, something along those lines. And hopefully, if I find her out in the wild too, that she'll have more support gems that are stronger. But this is just like a very basic level of her at level 83. Anytime that you get a mercenary, you want to try to get level 83, and I think now that there's the T17s where you can get like level 84 versions of the mercenaries, I believe. It's just speculation. I haven't done a tier 17 yet, but that's just my thought process, is that they'll have level 84 mercenaries in there. You notice I already did like a little showcase demonstration. You can click on the card on the top right and it'll show that video. A little demonstration like how super overpowered this character is, but this character is super broken, like super OP broken. So what's good about Alsina is that she always stays super close to you, always stays super close to you, and then like her teleport range is just perfect, where she's always teleporting right back in if you go a little too far away from her. So you'll always literally almost have haste like 99% of the time, but sometimes you'll see like a split second that it turns off. That's just like a fraction of a second, so it's literally almost a 100% uptime with her. But yeah, you can see she's just super busted. And everything that she hits, she does like this domino effect of explosions and everyone just dies. Like, she's super busted. And we're going to talk about all those explosions right now. So first things first, we're going to talk about the weapon and the bow. This is actually the most expensive item I've ever bought in this league so far. This cost me 1 divine alone, and that is it. Everything else in this build is super cheap, around 100 chaos, 50 chaos, 20 chaos, 10 chaos. It's very super cheap to get all these items. The impulsors, I think they keep going down, but I got this one for 100 chaos alone. So this is the second most expensive thing that I bought, I believe. So literally all the most expensive items that I bought in this game is for my mercenary, which is super crazy. But let's not get off topic. Let me talk about the weapon here. So when I mentioned about all the minion combos and all that crazy stuff, it's very important to shock the enemy. So when we talked about the regret angels, they apply bitter, which gets a chance to critical strike. Anytime that you critical strike a minion with a elemental damage, lightning, fire, cold, it'll add its ailment, and for lightning that is shock. So applying brittle lets my D2 mercenary have more critical strikes and apply more shocks. So then the impulsors can come into effect, always making sure that the enemy explodes, doing shock damage by 5%. What you want to focus on for the weapon is physical damage, super high physical damage, and super high lightning damage. You don't really need to focus on the other elementals. It's up to you if you want to, but you just want to make sure that you're getting the highest value damage bow with good attack speed on it. And that is good enough for this bow. High physical damage is that she actually does bleeding, so she has a greater chance to bleed targets, which is one thing. And another thing is lightning damage, what we already covered with the impulsors. But the bleeding part is super important because it's rocking Venopuncture's rings, and it's also rocking Hephaestus. I think, oh my god, I know I'm gonna butcher this. I'm gonna say Hephaestus Serpent Scale gloves. So with these two items right here, adds explosions to themselves. So the Veno punctures, what they do is if an enemy is chilled, hence the regret angels doing cold damage, and I have hatred aura, and the regret angels also apply bitter. So if the D2 mercenary is hitting the mob, it does cold damage too, so it's going to freeze mobs. If an enemy mob is frozen, it's going to shatter. And vice versa for the gloves. If the target is bleeding, it's going to explode, doing 5% explosion. So we have three sources of explosions going on. We have the Impulsor's gloves, we have the Impulsor's chest piece doing an explosion for 5%, we have the gloves for doing 5%. I forgot what the shatter percentage is for the explosions, but yeah, we have three explosions going on, not just one. So that's super insane, godlike killing DPS going on here. Super insane, crazy. But what you will really notice is that the gloves have the corruption of temporal chains on hit. The reason why we have temporal chains on hit because the minions are doing elements like poison damage, shock, and freeze. And bitter just makes all those ailments last longer at a better duration. And then plus, especially with poison, how poison works is that if the temporal chains are on the enemy mobs, the poison tick rate is still the same, but it increases duration of the stacks being applied on the enemy stack or on the enemy mob. So it makes poison last longer, doing more damage and keeping the same rate of the poison damage tick, which is super good. So yeah, temporal chains is always super powerful, super broken. And that's why we have the Doldry's Damning Ring, because not only that it's doing temporal chains, it's also adding Poulter's Mark, which lowers their physical damage reduction, and adding physical damage to all hits against it. So that gives all your minions more physical damage to hit the target, which is super good. The minions or the mercenary or whoever gets the final kill will get a frenzy charge. So very big W here. So when I was thinking and I was just thinking about this, I was like, okay, I got these two curses going on. What else can I do? That's where Ephixia's Wrath, I think I'm saying it right, comes into play. This corruption right here, I got it really dirt cheap. Someone was selling it really cheap, and I just snagged this really quick. It was like 50 chaos, which should be like a divine or two divines, because it's doing arrows chaining +1, and also every time that it chains, it gets a 22% increase with hits and ailments for each time it's chained. I think that goes all together as one, but anyways, still, it's super powerful. But the main kicker of this quiver, it does two things. Gain 20% of physical damage as extra cold damage. So that's why I was saying earlier with your bow, just get very high physical damage and very high lightning elemental damage on the bow. That's all you really need. So it's taking its high physical damage value and adding more cold damage, and also we have hatred as well. 40% of the physical damage is extra. So it's literally almost getting 60% extra physical damage as cold damage, which is super insane. And what makes this super godlike, Hexes transfers to all enemies within 3 meters when the Hex enemy dies. So what this means is that if the enemy has Poulter's Mark and Temporal's Chains, and it explodes, it's going to do chain reactions of explosions and curses. If a whole bunch of enemies are lined up, like if you have a super juicy, crazy gigabuff map where let's say that every enemy is super close to each other in 3 meters, it could probably delete the whole map in an instant go. That's what I've been noticing, and it'll just destroy everything in its path. Super insane and broken. And last but not least, let's talk about it being a support minion too. So not only that it's a godlike monster doing a lot of DPS, it's actually a support system for all my minions as well, and making my minions do tons of super DPS. Remember how I talked about volatility and how volatility has that downside of the less minimal damage happening, and to bypass the negative effect of volatility is Perquail's Toe. And with Perquail's Toe, nearby allies damage with hits is lucky. That basically means is that when your minions hit an enemy target, it will actually get a reroll of the damage that it's doing, and it's going to recalculate for a second value. So let's say, for example, Dancing Duo rolled a median damage of doing 1,000 damage, right? So it did 1,000 damage. That's pretty medium. And then what happens is that 1,000 damage gets re-rolled plus up. So that damage can re-roll again, and let's say the maximum damage is 2,000, right? So what it's going to do is that will re-roll that 1,000, and it re-roll to 1,500, and that will be the final damage. So instead of hitting the enemy mob for 1,000 damage, it actually hit the enemy mob for 1,500. So it gives a second chance to do higher damage. And same thing if the damage can re-roll to its max value of 2,000. Perquail's Toe is always beneficial in a minion build. It makes all your minion damage go super crazy. It gives a second chance for everything that it's doing. The brittle effects, the shock value effects, the frozen effects, the poison damage effects. The DPS that it does, it gives it a second chance of a reroll, taking the same value that it has and going upwards. Godlike broken, super broken amulet for minion builds. And nobody talks about it. Super amazing for a meta build, and it's on a Mercenary. And last but least, talking about is Leercast, that you and your nearby allies will get 50% increased damage. A very good boost for minion damage overall. So it's doing everything. It's being godlike DPS, it's being godlike support, and the remaining gear, I just put on more DPS boots, 20% increased physical global damage, and 40% increased projectile damage, and it's unaffected by shock ground. And same with impulsors, it's unaffected by shock. So any shocking values, and that's also the downside of Perquail's Toe, is that the user suffers lightning damage wearing impulsors, and also Brian Whaler's boots. This mercenary can never be shocked. And this whole interaction with, protecting the mercenary from shock was just super random. I was not paying attention. I just wanted to get these boots so it can do more physical damage and I can get more explosions. But then when I was reading more into the Perquail's Toe and its downside, I was super shocked that it protects itself from shock. And I didn't even know about it. So all that came together naturally, And I was like, okay, well, damn, I wasn't even paying attention and I solved it. Now you guys are probably like, well, that's all great and stuff. The Mercenary can do all this crazy stuff. It's a good support system and does great DPS. It does all this crazy things, but you're a minion build and it's your minions are going to steal the credit. So this build's not going to work. And that's where I got you guys there. This Mercenary will always get the kill credit and it's way better than Grave Binding, the Gluttony belt. And what the Gluttony belt does is that if the enemy is cursed, you have Culling Strike against it. And what I've noticed is that the Culling Strike mechanic is pretty high. It's higher than 10%. I mean, I've been killing Pinnacle bosses. I've been killing just these random bosses, and the Culling Strike is super high, like almost 20%, like a Slayer level. And I don't know, that's what I've seen. I'm just like, oh my god, that's super crazy. Or maybe that's just 10%, and my eyes are just playing with me. As we already talked before, it does Poacher's Mark and also Temporal Chains. So Culling Strike will always happen, and then especially when it's doing chain reactions with all the explosions, with the 3 explosions and the Hex curses being transferred, all of those are going to have Culling Strike, and it's going to explode. So this is way better than Grave Bindings. The Mercenary is always going to get the kill credit because it's always doing this massive AoE of all the arrows and all that madness. So it's always going to get the last hit no matter what before your minions. That is the Diablo 2 Mercenary. I mean, this is super busted. Alicia, Anexian, Deadshot, and Famous Sniper. I'm declaring it, and I'm calling it. She is the best D2 Merc in Path of Exile right now. Better than everybody else. The last remaining skill gems that we did not cover are just the normal ones. Steel Skin is just for good defensives, just in case if you're very low on life, and then you just pop it real quick and just hope to God that you don't die. Clarity is to have more mana standability, and also your mana pool is your life, so having clarity is very important. Hatred, we did cover that a little bit, but it gives all your minions and your Mercenary more damage. And Flesh Offering, with the Ascendancy class, you are also affected by Flesh Offering, so it gives more attack speed and movement speed, and it helps you run around the map. And yeah, we covered all the skill gems and all that stuff when we talked about the minions, and that was it. Now we're going to talk about the passive skill tree. So if you plan on doing this as a league starter, I already have a 1.0 build for the starter of the passive skill tree. This is a more mid in-game advanced guide. Me talking about the passive skill tree. But all the beginner stuff is there, so it's going to be there in the cards on the top right. Just go to there, and then it'll have more details as it's more of a starter build. We're going to talk about the Ascendancy before anything. So the cool thing about the Scion, you can be every Ascendancy class in the game. It's kind of like a weaker version of the main one of the classes, like a Witch or Path Ranger, a Ranger Pathfinder, because they're way more stronger in a sense. But with this build, you get to be able to blend in both of them. And I believe the Scion class is the best minion build for the Dancing Dervish because, one, you have to maintain the Dancing Dervish and keep it max summon at all times. And that's why we have 3 Withering Jars. As you see here in the Ascendancy tree, we got Pathfinder. It gives you 10% increased movement speed under a flask effect, which is super good. Also, it removes bleeding when you use a flask, so you're pretty much super immune to bleeding because you're always using your flasks all the time. So your build is immune to bleeding. But the main kicker here, gain flask charges every 3 seconds for 3 charges. So basically, all you have to say is that you actually gain 1 flask charge every second. That basically makes your Dancing Dervish have a 100% uptime because your Withering Jars are always going to be refreshed and you always just have to cast the Withering Jars every 5 seconds to kill the worms, and eventually it will pop Dancing Duos, and then it just kind of keeps them up forever. I'm still trying to work on my timing, but I'm getting the hang of it. But I just wanted to show you that you can have a 100% upkeep, and I can actually even get a fourth jar. Like I can get rid of one of these Quicksilver flasks and get a fourth one if I want to. The next part is the Necromancer part. Not a lot going on here. It just gives 30 increase. It gives minions a 30% increase on damage, and the rest of the points it gives you more passive skill points. So that's super awesome. You get a total of 5 extra passive skill points from the Ascendancy tree alone. Super beneficial, especially when you're focusing on getting jewels as your main damage sources. So next, we're going to talk about the jewels and what I'm focusing on. Now I'm focusing on just pure maximizing my damage. The fourth slot is supposed to be increase attack speed, but those are super expensive, like 60 divine, 50 divine, 40 divine. I'm not at that level yet. Now I'm at the point where I get to replace weaker gems for stronger gems. What this does is that it gives your minions chaos damage and physical damage, making their poison damage more insane, because how poison works is that poison takes 30% of your chaos damage and it takes 30% of your physical damage. So that's kind of like 60%. That's why we don't do Unholy Might, because with Unholy Might, it takes all your physical damage away to chaos. And when poison works, it's only taking that 30% of that chaos damage, but that physical damage is missing. It's not taking that physical damage anymore. So that actually hurts your poison DPS. So that's why we stay away from Unholy Might. That's why you do not run it in your build. It's only good for leveling, just for the raw damage itself. It's not really made for end game for the poison damage for the late game. And the final thing that we have to talk about is gear, and that is it. So I'm using the Broken Crown. The reason why I'm using Broken Crown right now is that it's actually really good for chaos resistance, and that's all it's really good for. And it gives you good armor and energy shield for a starter. This will actually be replaced when I find a really good helmet on the market that gives a lot of high chaos resistance. Very good helmet for a league starter. This amulet right here cost me 50 chaos. This amulet here makes my hatred increased reservation get cut down almost by half. So without it, as you can see, it takes a good chunk of my mana pool away, and if I put it back on, it increases my mana pool significantly. Chest piece, the Servant of Decay, we talked about this. It gives you the void spawns. It gives you chaos resistance. And the main kicker of this, what I really like about it, it makes you super tanky. If you have 4 void spawns out, it gives you 16% from hits, so it's like even physical damage. If you get hit, it all goes to your void spawn's life instead of you. So literally, this is the best summoner's chest right now. So for the rings, there's nothing special. It just focuses on requirements like attributes, resistances, and focusing on life, mana, and energy shield, because remember, we have 3 life pools that we're working with. And these items are super cheap. They're very super common, and getting maximum energy shield, life, and mana, they're very cheap items, so it's a win-win situation. For the belt, as it gives you trial resistances, it focuses on your maximum life, your energy shield, and also your mana pool with the mana pool and a little bit of regeneration from the crafting bench. For the gloves, there's nothing special about them. It's just for defensive purposes. And now the corpse walkers, which is super important. So the point of the corpse walkers is to make sure that you're always having corpses, especially if you're fighting an uber pinnacle boss, so you can always cast Feeding Frenzy. And I was actually trying zombies before, so if you're a zombie build, they always die all the time. And that's why I stopped using the zombies, because they still keep dying. That's why I actually had the grave intentions in the first place, because I wanted my zombies to live. Still wasn't having it. Got the skill gem to level 20, and they're still dying, and I don't know why. Because I have good minion life regeneration going on, and I got I actually have a fair amount of the life, increased life notifiers on the tree, but you know, zombies are still dying. So I got rid of them and I stopped using them. But if you want to use zombies, always having corpses is always very important. But the one of the main things that reason why I got the corpse walkers boots is that for the life regeneration and the movement speed. Um, so when you're fighting a pinnacle boss, you'll see me do it a few times. I'm actually kind of running in a circle. That way I can always kind of stay in a trail around some corpses, and you know it makes me run a little bit faster. I'll do something like this, and you can see how I'm running a little bit faster. So, but yeah, like I talked about before, the corpse walker boots will actually fix the bugs for the regret angels. But yeah, for the main reason that these boots are here for is for the flesh offering, and that is about it. So now, what's last is that we need to talk about the path of building, and then we will be done. Just like my other video, when I did a screenshot right after I got done killing all the pinnacle bosses day one, with this mid-in-game build, this is a fresh snap of that as well as of making this video. Remember, this build is still working in progress. I might change something drastic and try to make the best that I can with it. But I'm just letting you guys know before we start talking about the path of building. With the path of building, it still hasn't. It's still currently being updated. There's no way that you can look at your regret angels and your void spawn damage DPS within the tree. I'm sure that will change later in the future when they add the resource management. So the only two skill gems that you can see at the moment is Raging Spirits and Dancing Duos. So yeah, if you're playing any of my builds, if you follow any of my build guides, it's all out of fun, pure enjoyment more than anything else.
Erasing time.